Welcome back, everybody. SF Live, episode number 81. My name is Kai Hoffman. I'm the CEO of the Soar Financial Group, and it's a pleasure to introduce Jason Stirbinskis. He's joining us in a couple seconds here. He's the Managing Director of Cerros Limited. But before we get started with our conversation with Jason, please be reminded to use hashtag LCL for your questions during our live conversation with Jason. Also, make sure to follow us here on YouTube, on Twitter, and Spotify and Instagram as well. Leave us a like, leave us a comment. That way we'll know what interests you and maybe have some questions that we did not answer during our upcoming session here with Jason. And we'll get to those afterwards as well. So now it is my pleasure to introduce Mr. Jason Stirbinskis. I've been working on that pronunciation for a little bit. And Jason, thanks for joining us at 7 a.m. where you're at. It's Monday afternoon here in Vancouver, 7 a.m. Tuesday morning in Perth. How are you doing? How are things?
I'm well. Thank you for the opportunity to talk to you and your listeners.
No, it's great. Thanks for coming on the program. Really appreciate that. A company I'm not too familiar with, I have to admit, but it's been highly recommended me to get you on the program. Why don't you give us an overview of the company, give us a brief history update or brief history lesson as well. How did everything come together?
Sure. Los Cerros is the merger of two Australian companies, Andes Resources, which has a very large greenfield portfolio in Colombia in the Mid-Cauca Porphyry Belt, and a company called Metminco, which is still a listed company. So we merged last year and essentially re-energized, reinvented the company, and I became the managing director of the new company, Los Cerros. And off we went. So we've been live as Los Cerros now since January and actively exploring in the former Metminco properties, not the Andes portfolio.
Oh, okay, interesting. It's I like Colombia. I've been down there a couple of times. I've been to a mine that's been fairly close to your project, El Roble. So I've been there and I've driven around the area through the coffee plantations and everything. So it's beautiful countryside. Let's talk about, before we dive into the projects, and I've got lots of questions about Colombia and your projects. Let's talk about capital structure first. Let's get that out of the way. You said you merged, you've created a new company, Los Cerros, just recently, and you've done a financing. Run us a bit through the cap structure. Who are the biggest shareholders? Let's start there.
Sure. You would have seen a recent announcement that we raised, well, in the process of, in fact, it concludes today or tomorrow, $10 million. That was a major milestone for us. But to put that into context, let me rewind sort of pre-COVID, sort of January, February timeframe. We have three projects in the Los Cerros region, in the Quinchia region. So there's Miraflores, Tesorito, and Chusquel, all combined to form Quinchia, and they're all about 3 kilometers from each other. So they're a tight little nest of very exciting targets. And we announced our intention to start drilling at one of those targets a while ago now and managed to raise some money on the back of that. We also announced a Hong Kong casino deal. And I'm sure you're going to ask me about that as we go through as well. And that created an interesting source of funds for us that also appealed to the market. So we with that money, we committed to drilling and got some interesting results. And then we released the most recent result from Tesorito. And again, we'll talk about that. And that really got the market excited. It was a fantastic result. Just 2 Thursdays ago, we put that out. Our share price went up 120% in that day. And on the back of that, we raised the $10 million. So where we are at the moment, we have a market cap of 60 million or so, depending on where the share price is when we wake up today. And our major shareholders is a group called Lizing, which is Hong Kong Casino, and again we'll talk about that as we go through. And then sitting behind Lizing is mainly individuals. We don't have anything in the way of a significant institutional shareholder base, mainly individuals, small funds, etc.
Okay. And historically, at what levels have you raised money, and how much does management own?
The raises post-merger have been 2 million, 3.5 million, and now 10 million. So we're fully funded now to the tune of $13 million in the bank and committed to 3 drill rigs running at the same time. So it's quite a significant change from a struggling story from the middle of last year. It's been an amazing journey, certainly nothing I've experienced in my long career to date. Amazing turnaround. Now, sorry, you asked me a second question there. What was that? Oh, shareholder Management shareholding, yeah. So we have to look at this 10 million and the repercussions that has once it's listed. So we'll see all the effects on the dilutions, etc. But there are 3 directors, and I would say if you were to add up directorship, it'd probably be about 4% of the company. 5% of the company would be within the directors.
Okay. And anybody participate in the last financing then? I think I've seen something in a press release. I'm not 100% sure. Yeah. Okay.
Yes, you're right. The chairman, Ross Ashton, he committed in the last capital raising, but the bulk of our participation, and by the way, that percentage, that 3-4%, whatever it's going to work out to be after this $10 million issue, is all money invested in the company. None of that is bonus shares or anything else. It's all cash that's gone in to fund the company over the last 3 or 4 raisings. Yeah, that's a good way of putting it, exactly.
Right. Okay, no, fantastic. And the financing has been really, really well received based on those results as well, obviously. It's been 4 times oversubscribed. Where did you see the interest coming from?
Yeah, this was very interesting, and it's very fresh news, Kai. It's just last Thursday, as I said, when all this was happening. So the drift or the change in the interest has come out of the institutionals and the next level up of investors. So we have always had this strong reputation within the retail base. And similar, but with that last drill result, people started to get an appreciation of the potential for the size of the Tesorito project. They started to do back of the envelope calculations, and I think that led us to falling onto the radar of sort of mid-tier institutionals and similar. So a lot of the interest came out of experts in the industry that have their analysts working behind the scenes doing those sorts of investigations and due diligence and saying, hey, Los Cerros just fell onto our radar. So we've got a lot of interest from that side of the market. And also our loyal shareholder base were very interested in topping up. So we got a lot of interest from shareholders that have participated in the last 2 or 3 raisings. And of course, they got priority over new money.
Yeah, just out of Australia or actually globally? Like, where's the interest, like, geographically coming from? Just curious.
Yeah, the bulk of it is Australia, no doubt about that. But we have had some interest out of Hong Kong. I think in this recent raise, we had some interest come out of North America as well.
Gotcha. Okay,
but still, the vast majority is Australian.
I think Hartley was running that one. Did they underwrite it as well, or was that just
No.
They were just broker? Gotcha. Okay.
No, they were just a broker, and underwriting would have been superfluous given it was 4 times oversubscribed.
Yeah, like in Canada these days, like those financings are called broad deals because you bring the investors to the banker and they just have to sign it pretty much, right? So it's not a bought deal anymore. But let's talk about use of proceeds. You hinted at using 3 drill rigs and other, like you used some of the money to repay debt. Give us some more details on that. What are you planning to do with the money, or what have you done with the money so far?
Sure. One of the legacies of the merger between Andes and Metminco was that Metminco brought to the table a $3.5 million debt due to Rand Merchant Bank due in 2024 or earlier if certain milestones were achieved. That was I was uncomfortable having that sort of hanging over us due in 2024. So we negotiated with Rand Merchant Bank to pay that out early for a total of $2.2 million. So the $3.5 million due 2024 paid now for $2.21 million. So that's where part of that money is going, to remove that debt and keep us nice and clean going forward. And then the vast majority of the rest of it is going into exploration. As we said, 3 drill rigs running concurrently. Well, 1 at the moment, but another 2 on the way, running concurrently. So that's going to go through that $10 million is mainly in the ground.
Yeah, how much does that translate into budgets? Like, I'm really curious. Like, how does that translate into meters and results? I'm always interested in drill results and drill news flow, right?
Yeah, sure. Well, with 3 rigs, these holes are typically 300 meters. So turnaround on news is 1 hole takes 2 to 3 weeks to drill, 2 to 3 weeks for assay. So you're getting a sort of a 6-week turnaround per drill hole. 3 rigs running, so you can get an idea that there's potential news flow every 2 or 3 weeks. You're going to have something to say from those drill results. In terms of drill costs, etc., that's a bit of an unknown. And again, I'm sure you're going to talk about Hong Kong Casino, but one of bringing in is our own rig. We're essentially becoming our own drilling company. And just what that means in terms of efficiencies and drill rates is a bit of a guess until we actually get up and running and see how efficient we can be. Look, I'm hoping that we'll see a 50% saving in costs because we have our own drill rig, and that means obviously the dollars go twice as far. There is a company called Tieto that we follow quite closely that's doing a similar sort of thing, and their savings are enormous. What they're doing, they can do 8, 9, 10 times as much drilling on the same budget. I don't expect we'll have those sorts of savings, but
what cost bases are we coming from when you're talking about 50%? Like, let's say, where were your past or previous drilling costs when you say, oh, we can potentially save 50%? Where would we be landing roughly?
Yeah, well, our drill rates are fairly typical for Colombia and for Australia. For that, sort of between $200 and $300 a meter is sort of typical cost.
Gotcha. Because with your relationship with your Hong Kong partner, Hong Kong Casino, it's a really interesting model. And since we're on that topic of drill costs, why don't we dive into that relationship a little closer and what it means? Like, why is it such a significant relationship for you guys?
Yeah. Hong Kong Casino is the company of a gentleman called Dr. Fu. He's a fairly prominent Chinese mining mogul. He was formerly with Western Mining in Australia as well, so he has a local reputation as well. So he's an expert. He's very good at what he does. His PhD is in geology, and he came onto the company. He did some due diligence on us, dove deep into our data, came back and participated in a capital raising in January. And then we started talking about the potential for creating this partnership with Hong Kong Casino. And the way that works is Hong Kong Casino essentially can fund up to $2 million of our exploration. And to give you sort of the best way to explain this is through an example. So we've already purchased a drill rig through Hong Kong Casino. So we've gone to Hong Kong Casino and we said, buy an Atlas Copco C5C Diamond Core drill rig. And they purchased the rig on our behalf. And then we issue them shares, the equivalent of purchase cost. And those shares are calculated on no discount or anything else. It's just calculated on the price.
Well, they must be doing really well now. They must be happy shareholders at this point. So
perfect. They are very happy. Yes, they're very happy, and we're very happy to have them as well. They've been a great partner.
Perfect. Drilling leads us to drill results. You put out some fantastic results recently that made your share price, as you said, pop by 120% in a single day. Run us through the results real quick, and also what does it mean? How are you following up on those results?
Sure. Well, to go back to what I was saying earlier, the Quinchia project is made up of 3 targets. Miraflores, which is an established reserve. So that's kind of like the foundation of the Quinchia project. We have Chuscal, which is an early stage project, and we might come back to that one. And then we have Tesorito, which is only sub 1 kilometre away from Miraflores and even closer to the proposed plant site. So Tesorito is where this recent news has come from. It's a near-surface porphyry. So a porphyry basically on the surface. There is previous results there. We got a staggering 384 metres at a gram per tonne from surface. Yeah. And then we had another hit at 253 metres at a gram per tonne from surface. Now, those 2 drill results are perpendicular to each other. And that's quite important because if you've got if you get one good hole like that, you can say, oh, you're just in a high-grade area and you drill straight through the middle of it. But if you then drill 90 degrees to that and you get 250 meters, you can't say that. You can't say, oh, this is just a narrow high-grade pod. No, it's got some volume to it. And this hole that we drilled, and they're old results. This hole that we drilled, if you can picture both of those being 45 degrees, was between the 2 of them. So it kind of, but in the same orientation as hole 7, so same orientation as one of those holes. So with those 3 drill results, you can get some confidence about calculating a volume, a potential volume. So we got 253 metres at a gram per tonne, essentially from surface, 384 metres at a gram per tonne, essentially from surface, and then we got this recent result, the one on Thursday, which was 230 metres at a gram per tonne between those 2. So you can work out, and from surface, so you can work out volumes. And that's what got everyone very excited. You can now say, okay, we get an idea that we've got something significant here. Now, I said to the board when I briefed the board for the first time on these results, and they said, well, what do you make of them? And I said, well, it actually is a change. The question we're asking about Tieto is different now. Before today, we were asking, do we have anything at Tesorito? Today and going forward, we're asking, how big is this thing that we've got at Tesorito? The question has changed because we've got something. We just don't know whether it's inconsequential or it's significant. Now, the other part of the story that got everyone excited, and it will really be picked up by the expert geologists, is I made a passing comment and included a photo of bornite.
I've noticed that.
Bornite is a copper mineral.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that resonated with the experts out there. Bornite is a copper-rich mineral, and we encountered a zone of bornite as we drilled through. Nothing economic. I'm not suggesting that we found economic copper grades there, but it's interesting because the bornite tells us, one, we're in a very hot location, so we're in the center of a porphyry type intrusive. So that's interesting. But it also tells us there's copper somewhere. Now, this whole mid-Colca porphyry belt, a very prolific belt in Colombia, is very poor in copper, with a few exceptions. Nuevo Chiquero or Quebradona is one example where there is copper. And that's 50 kilometers north of us and in the same geological belt as us. And so when we hit this bornite, it's telling us that there's copper somewhere in this system, where mineralogically speaking, something similar to Nuevo Chiquero, which is a massive discovery by Anglo Gold Ashanti. And that got everyone excited because it's telling us now either this porphyry, which is exposed at the surface, goes down very deep and contains copper below where we drilled, or there's another pulse that is copper rich below us that we haven't intercepted yet, and we're seeing that halo of bornite appearing because of that second pulse. So that got everyone very excited as well.
Yeah, I noticed it. And I'm trying to find the question I wrote down. Like you got bornite in the presentation in that photo, but you didn't report any copper grades or any results in that. Like, so I thought that was quite noticeable.
Yeah.
And also quite a bit of chalcopyrite.
Yeah, well, that's the context.
Yeah. So
exactly, that's the context. It's not of economic significance at this point, but it is geologically very exciting because it tells us there is copper somewhere that we need to find here.
So since we're on the topic of Tesorito right now, and we've been getting quite a few questions, let me switch over to Twitter real quick. We've got a couple live questions in from Specific Risk. He's with Bay Street or at Bay Street Equity on Twitter. You can't see the questions, but I'll read them out loud real quick. And you just talked about significance of bornite in hole 8, and then he's got a second question. Is like, where are you drilling hole 10? Is that under 8? And the depth potential of the rig on site.
Sure. Yes, it is under 8. It's not directly under 8. We want to get the most information we can out of these holes. So, yes, we want to test depth extension, and that's the intention of this hole, to see what is below hole 8, because that gave us some very exciting results. So, yes, we're drilling under hole 8, but we're also trying to maximize the value of that hole. So we've drifted further to the east and testing the eastern limits of how big this thing could be. So it kills two birds with one stone.
Fantastic. We got one more question. Is like, when do you expect results from hole number 9?
Hole number 9 finished very, very recently. So I think it's been shipped. So a few weeks.
Gotcha. Okay, let's switch over back to a dual screen. And like, how many meters are you spending on Tesorito now? Like you said, 3 rigs. Like, are they all going to Tesorito now, or what's the plan there and the budgeting of drill meters?
Sure. The budget has to be recut because of the recent raising. I see no reason to stop drilling, so we're just going to keep on going. At the start, we announced 2,500 meters at Tesorito, but already based on that result, it's not a real number anymore. We're just going to keep on going. In terms of where the rigs will be located, we currently have one rig dedicated to Tesorito, and we can do 700 plus meters with that rig, no problem. The second rig will go to Chuscal. And if you like, we can talk about Chuscal in a minute, but that's where the second rig is going initially. The third rig we haven't dedicated to a site yet. We could go to Chuscal, Tesorito, or even Miraflores. There's some interesting upside at Miraflores that we want to test as well. So we haven't quite dedicated that rig to any particular location because it'll obviously be dictated by the results.
Yeah. How do you rate internally the projects you have? Tesorito, Chuscal, and Miraflores, like internally, is that the way I just ranked them? Is that sort of the way you're looking at them right now?
It depends on your ranking criteria, Kai. Miraflores is like a sturdy base for the Quinchia project. It's an established reserve, 3.3 gram per ton. It's there, it's drilled, we know what it is. Okay, so that's that. If you say, so what's the most advanced? It's Miraflores. Tesorito is the most exciting because it's on the surface. It's a porphyry on the surface, so the economics become instantly more appealing because it's on the surface, right? So that's very good. We know a fair bit about Tesorito. We're drilling there now. Personally, upon the merger, it was the one that I was most excited by, simply because it had a good combination of risk and reward. You know, near the surface, good chance you're going to hit it. You'd be pretty unlucky if you didn't, and potential for size. Then if you ask, well, if your criteria is greenfield and scale and all those sorts of things, then you've got to look at Chusco. Chusco has the potential to be very significant. Like I mentioned, those intercepts at Tesorito, we got 350 meters and 320 meters at sort of roughly 0.5 gram per ton at Chusco. And we haven't even hit the porphyry yet. That's the halo around the porphyry. We don't know where the porphyry is yet. And we're getting those sorts of grades, 350 meters at 0.57 gram per ton, 320 meters at 0.4 something, 0.48, I think it was. So Chusco is really exciting, but very early stage. So
Gotcha.
You tell me your criteria, and then I'll put them in order.
I was going to actually ask you, because in your presentation you say focus on discovery of tier 1 and tier 2 assets. It's very rare that companies say they're focusing on tier 2 assets, because everybody's looking for the big elephant, the tier 1 assets, right? So the question also becomes how do you define the tiers? And for me, to be quite honest, going through the May presentation, which has been updated recently, I learned, Miraflores drew a lot of attention also away from the other asset, from the other exploration program, the project you just mentioned. So at first, one of my questions actually is are you going to use Miraflores as a hub and spoke model where you're going to build a central facility and just feed to it while I was doing my due diligence? But now learning about all the exploration success you have around it, I think that idea I can scrap pretty much, right? Or am I completely off?
No, you can't. No, you can't scrap it just yet. You were right up until that last moment. It hasn't been scrapped. There are three parts to our exploration strategy. So the first one we call top up. Now, as I said, Miraflores, 3.3 gram per ton, 500,000 ounce reserve over a life of mine of 10 years. That's giving you an NPV at $1,400 US an ounce. It's giving you an NPV of sort of 120 million or something like that. Payback of 3.3 years, that sort of thing. Internal rate of return of 28%. At $1,900 an ounce, it's something far more appealing, right? So that's the foundation of the story. At 3.3 gram per ton, I would like to see something a little higher in early years, a grade a little higher than that in the early years. From an operating perspective, Miraflores has a pretty good economic profile. Its margins on operating basis is quite good. It's just because of that grade, and the grade's quite consistent, it doesn't have a boost of profits in the early years to offset the capital burden of building the plant in the first place. The $70, $80 million to build the plant. That's what makes Miraflores struggle economically. It's being able to pay the plant off. Once it's up and running, it's a pretty healthy profile. So all we need is a top up, and that's why the strategy is called top up. It's just 50,000, 100,000 ounces, whatever the number is, a slightly better grade in early years, and Miraflores is off and running. And that's a DFS, detailed feasibility study, and a lot of the approvals are in place. So it would be a very quick pathway to production if we decided to turn the key on that. So that's the top up strategy, finding near surface gold for a modest production profile, and that's your tier 2. The reason why we're saying tier 2, finding those sorts of discoveries props up Miraflores. But sitting behind that is the second part of our strategy, which is the big porphyry hunters. You know, we're in the mid-Cauca porphyry belt. There are hundreds of millions of ounces of discoveries in this mid-Cauca porphyry belt, and some of them are you can't even dispute whether they're tier 1 or not. They're globally significant discoveries, like Nueva Chiquero at 30 million ounces gold equivalent, La Colossa, which is even bigger, Baritica in the north, which has a very high profile on the Canadian market at, I can't remember the numbers now, but I think it's like 10 million ounces at some ridiculously high grade at 10 grams per ton or something like that. So it's big discoveries in the area. And so that's our second part of the strategy. It's hunting those porphyries. We've got one at Tesorito. Miraflores is not a porphyry. It's a breccia pipe. Chusco, everything is suggesting that this mineralization that we've already encountered, whilst we haven't hit the porphyry, has come from a porphyry. It has pathfinders and indicator elements in it that suggest it's from a porphyry source. So there's something big driving the Chusco story as well. So that's the second part of the strategy, hunting those porphyries. And the third part is the greenfield. We've only talked about 3 projects in a very small area of a massive portfolio that we have of essentially unexplored regions, and that's keeping that pipeline going. So that's the third part of the strategy.
For some reason, your video just froze, but your audio is still coming in. So It's interesting. Okay, to wrap it up, we're hitting our timeline. We're already way over it. I just quickly want to ask one more question about working in Colombia. What's your experience? What do you need in terms of permits right now? You're adding 2 more drill rigs. What do you need? What has been done there?
Sure. Well, if I take the big picture first of all, Colombia has a difficult history. There's no doubt about that with and the FARC war. That, in the most part, is behind them. Particularly with the guerrilla war, there was a peace accord signed several years ago now, and we're seeing the risk profile of the country improve dramatically as a result of that. And that's why you're seeing the big end of town, the major mining houses showing an interest in Colombia now, because its risk profile is far better than it was in recent years. So from that perspective, it's looking really, really healthy. The government is supportive of mining, so that also helps. And then you've got to look at the regional level and the attitude to mining, and that's really at a regional level. That you can get a whole range of responses from local states and provinces, etc. Where we are in the Quinchia district is, I would say, on the better side of the average. So mining is certainly accepted as part of the economy, an important part of the economy, and we have a strong relationship in that community. When we're not drilling, there are 30 employees in the company, and 26 of those live in the local village. So we're well and truly entrenched into the local community, and that's appreciated by them. At the moment, we're probably double that size, but I haven't counted just how many people we've got at the moment. And all of those, with the exception of very few, come from the local village. So we have a good working relationship all the way through, from the local town, the region, and supportive governments at the federal level.
Fantastic. We got to wrap it up here at this point, but I want to give you one last chance to sort of put a bow around everything and give us a summary. What can investors expect maybe in the next 3 months in terms of news flow and catalysts?
Yeah, we have 3 rigs. Well, we don't have 3 rigs yet. The second rig and the third rig are on their way. So that October sort of timeline for those. With 3 rigs running and 3 high-profile targets to drill, Tesorito, Chuscal, and Miraflores, an intense campaign over the next more than 3 months. It'll be going much longer than that now that we have the funding to do so. The news flow is going to be fairly frequent and hopefully very encouraging. That first drill hole had a spectacular result on the share price and really changed the way we have to approach Tesorito. But nonetheless, drilling there with 1 rig and possibly 2. We might direct that third rig into Tesorito as well. So lots of news flow. And if it's anything like the first drill result, then it's going to be a pretty spectacular 6 months for us.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us, Jason. Really appreciate it. Thanks for giving us that update. And everybody else, thanks for your questions. That was really helpful. This is an interactive format, so your questions really make this more lively and not a stiff conversation between 2 mining people. So really appreciate you coming on. And have a good rest of your day. Like, I'm going home now, but you're just starting. So, follow us on Twitter, follow us on YouTube. Make sure to subscribe to our channels, leave some comments, give us a thumbs up, and hit the alert button. That way you get notified when we go live again. Jason, you have a good afternoon or a good day, and we'll talk soon.